Welcome to Snoozecast, the podcast designed to help you fall asleep. Find us on snoozecast.com and follow us on Instagram at snoozecast to find behind-the-scenes content. If you enjoy our show, please write a review on the podcast app. Also, share us with a friend. If you'd like to get an email once a week with what sleep stories we're coming out with that week, along with any Snoozecast news, subscribe to the Snoozeletter at snoozecast.com. This episode is brought to you by our Patreon supporters and by The Best China. Tonight, we'll read the second and final part to An Old-Fashioned Thanksgiving, a short story written by Louisa May Alcott. Please find the first part that aired on November 16th, 2020. An Old-Fashioned Thanksgiving is a simple story set in the early 1800s, featuring a country family in New Hampshire. It's full of idyllic and peaceful descriptions from an earlier time. In part 1, the Bassett parents rush off when they hear that the grandmother was very ill, just as a snowstorm was starting. This left all the children to manage the farmhouse on their own. Luckily, they're a resourceful and industrious group. We'll pick up with oldest sister Tilly and Prue in the kitchen as they're starting their first attempt at a Thanksgiving feast on their own. Let's get cozy. Close your eyes. Relax your body into the softness of your bed. Now, take a few deep breaths. Tilly said to her sister, Prue, "Well, I'll get the pudding off my mind first, for it ought to boil all day. Put the big kettle on and see that the spit is clean while I get ready." Prue obediently tugged away at the crane with its black hooks, from which hung the iron tea kettle and three-legged pot. Then she settled the long spit in the grooves made for it in the tall andirons, and put the dripping pan underneath, for in those days meat was roasted as it should be, not baked in ovens. Meantime, Tilly attacked the plum pudding. She felt pretty sure of coming out right here, for she had seen her mother do it so many times. It looked very easy. So in went suet and fruit, all sorts of spice, to be sure she got the right ones, and brandy instead of wine. But she forgot both sugar and salt, and tied it in a cloth so tightly that it had no room to swell, so it would come out as heavy as lead and as hard as a cannonball, if the bag did not burst and spoil it all. Happily unconscious of these mistakes, Tilly popped it into the pot and proudly watched it bobbing about before she put the cover on and left it to its fate. "I can't remember what flavoring Ma puts in," she said, when she had got her bread well soaked for the stuffing. "Sage and onions and applesauce go with goose, but I can't feel sure of anything but pepper and salt for the turkey. Ma puts in some kind of mint, I know, but I forget whether it's spearmint, peppermint, or pennyroyal," answered Prue in a tone of doubt, but trying to show her knowledge of yarbs, or at least of their names. "Seems to me it's sweet marjoram or summer savory. I guess we'll put both in, and then we're sure to be right. The best is up garret. You run and get some, while I mash the bread," commanded Tilly, dividing into the mess. Away trotted Prue, but in her haste she got catnip and wormwood, for the garret was darkish, and Prue's little nose was so full of the smell of the onions she had been peeling that everything smelt of them. Eager to be of use, she pounded up the herbs and scattered the mixture with a liberal hand into the bowl. "It doesn't smell just right, but I suppose it will when it's cooked," said Tilly, as she filled the empty stomach that seemed aching for food and sewed it up with the blue yarn, which happened to be handy. She forgot to tie down his legs and wings, but she set him by till his hour came, well satisfied with her work. It took a long time to get all the vegetables ready, for, as the cellar was full, the girls thought they would have every sort. F helped, and by noon all was ready for cooking, and the cranberry sauce, a good deal scorched, was cooling in the lean-to. Luncheon was a lively meal, and doughnuts and cheese vanished in such quantities that Tilly feared no one would have an appetite for her sumptuous dinner. The boys assured her they would be starving by 5 o'clock, and Saul mourned bitterly over the little pig that was not to be served up. "Now you all go and coast, while Prue and I set the table and get out the best china," said Tilly, bent on having her dinner look well, no matter what its other failings might be. Out came the rough sleds. On went the round hoods, old hats, red cloaks, and moccasins, and away trudged the 4 younger Bassets to disport themselves in the snow and try the ice down by the old mill, where the great wheel turned and splashed so merrily in the summertime. F took his fiddle and scraped away to his heart's content in the parlor, while the girls, after a short rest, set the table and made all ready to dish up the dinner when that exciting moment came. It was not at all the sort of table we see now, but would look very plain and countrified to us, with its green-handled knives and 2-pronged steel forks, its red and white china, and pewter platters, scoured till they shone, with mugs and spoons to match, and a brown jug for the cider. The cloth was coarse, but white as snow, and the little maids had seen the blue-eyed flax grow, out of which their mother wove the linen and watered while it bleached in the green meadow. They had no napkins and little silver, but the best tankard and Ma's few wedding spoons were set forth in state. Nuts and apples at the corners gave an air, and the place of honor was left in the middle for the oranges yet to come. "Don't it look beautiful?" said Prue, when they paused to admire the general effect. "Pretty nice, I think. I wish Ma could see how well we can do it," began Tilly, when a loud howling startled both girls and sent them flying to the window. The short afternoon had passed so quickly that twilight had come before they knew it, and now, as they looked out through the gathering dusk, they saw 4 black figures tearing up the road to come bursting in, all screaming at once, "The bear! The bear! F, get the gun! He's coming! He's coming!" F had dropped his fiddle, got down his gun before the girls could calm the children enough to tell their story, which they did in a somewhat incoherent manner. "Down in the holler, coastin', we heard a growl," began Saul, with his eyes as big as saucers. "I saw him first looking over the wall," roared Seth, eager to get his share of honor. "Awful big and shaggy," quavered Roxy, clinging to Tilly, while Rhodey hid in Prue's skirts and piped out, "His great paws kept clawing at us, and I was so scared my legs would hardly go. We ran away as fast as we could go. He come growling after us. He's awful hungry, and he'll eat every one of us if he gets in," continued Saul, looking about him for a safe retreat. "Oh, F, don't let him eat us," cried both little girls, flying upstairs to hide under their mother's bed as their surest shelter. "No danger of that, you little geese. I'll shoot him as soon as he comes. Get out of the way, boys." And F raised the window to get good aim. "There he is. Fire away and don't miss," cried Seth, hastily following Saul, who had climbed to the top of the dresser as a good perch from which to view the approaching fray. Prue retired to the hearth, as if bent on dying at her post rather than desert the turkey, now browning beautiful, as she expressed it. But Tilly boldly stood at the open window, ready to lend a hand if the enemy proved too much for F. All had seen bears, but none had ever come so near before, and even brave F felt that the big brown beast slowly trotting up the dooryard was an unusually formidable specimen. He was growling and stopped now and then as if to rest and shake himself. "Get the axe, Tilly, and if I should miss, stand ready to keep him off while I load again," said F, anxious to get his first bear in style and alone. A girl's help couldn't count. Tilly flew for the axe and was at her brother's side by the time the bear was near enough to be dangerous. He stood on his hind legs and seemed to sniff with relish the savory odors that poured out of the window. But a very singular thing happened next, and all who saw it stood amazed. For suddenly Tilly threw down the axe, flung open the door, and ran straight into the arms of the bear, who stood erect to receive her, while his growlings changed to a loud ha-ha that startled the children more than the report of a gun. "It's Gad Hopkins trying to fool us," cried F, much disgusted at the loss of his prey, for these hardy boys loved to hunt and prided themselves on the number of wild animals and birds they found in one year. "Oh, Gad, how could you scare us so?" laughed Tilly, still held fast in one shaggy arm of the bear, while the other drew a dozen oranges from some deep pocket in the buffalo skin coat and fired them into the kitchen with such good aim that Eph ducked, Prue screamed, and Saul and Seth came down much quicker than they went up. "Well, you see I got upsot over yonder, and the old horse went home while I was floundering in a drift. So I tied on the bufflers to tote 'em easy. Come along till I see the children playing in the holler. I just meant to give 'em a little scare, but they run like partridges, and I kept up the joke to see how Eph would like that sort of company." And Gad haw-hawed again. "You'd have had a warm welcome if we hadn't found you out. I'd have put a bullet through you in a jiffy, old chap," said Eph, coming out to shake hands with the young giant, who was only a year or two older than himself. "Come in and set up to dinner with us. Prue and I have done it all ourselves, and Pa will be along soon, I reckon," cried Tilly, trying to escape. "Couldn't no ways. My folks will think I'm dead if I don't get along home. Since the horse and sleigh have gone ahead empty, I've done my errand and had my joke. Now I want my pay, Tilly." And Gad took a hearty kiss from the rosy cheeks of his little sweetheart, as he called her. His own cheeks tingled with the smart slap she gave him as she ran away, calling out that she hated bears and would bring her axe next time. "I ain't afeared. Your sharp eyes found me out, and if you run into a bear's arms, you must expect a hug," answered Gad, as he pushed back the robe and settled his fur cap more becomingly. "I should have known you in a minute if I hadn't been asleep when the girls squalled. You did it well, though, and I advise you not to try it again in a hurry, or you'll get shot," said Eph, as they parted, he rather crestfallen and Gad in high glee. "My sakes alive, turkey is burnt one side, and the kettles have boiled over so the pies I put to warm are all ashes," scolded Tilly, as the flurry subsided, and she remembered her dinner. "Well, I can't help it. I couldn't think of victuals when I expected to be eaten alive myself, could you?" pleaded poor Prue, who had tumbled into the cradle when the rain of oranges began. Tilly laughed, and all the rest joined in. So good humor was restored, and the spirits of the younger ones were revived by sucks from the one orange, which passed from hand to hand with great rapidity, while the older girls dished up the dinner. They were just struggling to get the pudding out of the cloth when Roxy called out, "Here's Pa." "There's folks with him," added Rhodey. "Lots of 'em. I see 2 big sleighs chock full," shouted Seth, peering through the dusk. "It looks like a cemetery. Guess Grandma's dead and come up to be buried here," said Saul in a solemn tone. This startling suggestion made Tilly, Prue, and Eph hastened to look out, full of dismay at such an ending of their festival. "If that's a funeral, the mourners are uncommon jolly," said Eph dryly, as merry voices and loud laughter broke the silence outside. "I see Aunt Cynthia and Cousin Hetty, and there's Mose and Amos. I do declare, Pa's bringing 'em all home, and I have some fun here," cried Prue, as she recognized one familiar face after another. "Oh, my patience! Ain't I glad I got dinner? Don't I hope it will turn out good!" exclaimed Tilly, while the twins pranced with delight, and the small boys roared, "Hooray for Pa! Hooray for Thanksgiving!" The cheer was answered heartily, and in came Father, Mother, Baby, aunts and cousins, all in great spirits, and all much surprised to find such a festive welcome awaiting them. "Ain't Grandma dead at all?" asked Saul, in the midst of the kissing and handshaking. "Bless your heart, no. It was all a mistake of old Mr. Chadwick's. He's as deaf as an adder, and when Mrs. Brooks told him Mother was mending fast, and she wanted me to come down today, certain sure, he got the message all wrong, and gave it to the first person passing in such a way as to scare me most to death, send us down in a hurry. Mother was sitting up as chirk as you please, dreadful sorry you didn't all come. So, to keep the house quiet for her, give you a taste of the fun, your pa fetched us all up to spend the evening, and we're going to have a jolly time, to judge by the looks of things," said Aunt Cynthia, briskly finishing the tale when Mrs. Bassett paused for want of breath. "What in the world put it into your head we was coming, and set you to getting up such a supper?" asked Mr. Bassett, looking about him, well pleased and much surprised at the plentiful table. Tilly modestly began to tell, but the others broke in and sang her praises in a sort of chorus in which bears, pigs, pies, and oranges were oddly mixed. Great satisfaction was expressed by all, and Tilly and Prue were so elated by the commendation of Ma and the aunts that they set forth their dinner, sure everything was perfect. But when the eating began, which it did the moment wraps were off, then their pride got a fall, for the first person tasted the stuffing. It was big Cousin Mose, and that made it harder to bear. He nearly choked over the bitter morsel. "Tilly Bassett, whatever made you put wormwood and catnip in your stuffin'?" demanded Ma, trying not to be severe, for all the rest were laughing, and Tilly looked ready to cry. "I did it," said Prue, nobly taking all the blame, which caused Pa to kiss her on the spot and declare that it didn't do a mite of harm, for the turkey was all right. "I never see onions cooked better. All the vegetables is well done, and the dinner a credit to you, my dears," declared Aunt Cynthia, with her mouth full of the fragrant vegetables she praised. The pudding was an utter failure, in spite of the blazing brandy in which it lay, as hard and heavy as one of the stone balls on Squire Duncan's great gate. It was speedily whisked out of sight, and all fell upon the pies, which were perfect. But Tilly and Prue were much depressed, and didn't recover their spirits till the dinner was over and the evening fun well under way. Blind man's buff, hunt the slipper, come philanderer, and other lively games soon set everyone bubbling over with jollity. And when F struck up Money Musk on his fiddle, old and young fell into their places for a dance. All down the long kitchen they stood, Mr. and Mrs. Bassett at the top, the twins at the bottom, and then away they went, heeling and toeing, cutting pigeon wings, and taking their steps in a way that would convulse modern children with their newfangled romps called dancing. Mose and Tilly covered themselves with glory by the vigor with which they kept it up, till fat Aunt Cynthia fell into a chair, breathlessly declaring that a very little of such exercise was enough for a woman of her heft. Apples and cider, chat and singing finished the evening, and after a grand kissing all around, the guests drove away in the clear moonlight, which came just in time to cheer their long drive.